first of all, let me spend some words on the title and motivation of this presentation. Maybe a few of you remember that last year, the very same event, there was another presentation on Bitcoin. It was basically focused on how Bitcoin can be used to buy DDoS online, which is, and which focuses on to the bad uses, bad application of the technology, according to my definition. And we know that all technology can be used for good or for bad, and that's why I called this presentation the other side of the coin. I will only focus on the legitimate use of cryptocurrencies, and I will discuss the things that a very normal user should be aware of if they want to engage in that game. So the focus will be on technology and IT security. I will not discuss any kind of legal aspects or financial or economical aspects of using cryptocurrencies. I was warned by the organizers that this is not a crypto conference, so we will really not go hardcore. We are all after lunch, so I believe we will take it easy. As I'm not a native speaker, feel free to interrupt or wave, or if I cannot make myself understood, if I'm talking too fast or too slowly. Okay. Oh yes, and some disclaimers before I forget. It is the own responsibility of everybody to comply with the applicable laws in his country. Do we have anybody here from Russia? Any guests? No? No comrades here, okay. Maybe you know why I have asked this. They are preparing a very special law about penalizing Bitcoin, the use of Bitcoin, or publishing information which makes other users easier to adopt Bitcoin. So it's a little bit of, it's still a question for me what will happen on my next visit to Moscow, whether they will switch me off right at the border patrol or not, but that's another question. So yes, and the last but not least, the very important disclaimer, this presentation is my own, content is my own, any thoughts expressed here are my own, and they don't necessarily reflect the interests or strategies or opinions of my employer. Okay, having said that, I have prepared you a nice word cloud. Please stretch if you have not heard about Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies at all. Okay, nobody's stretching. If somebody hasn't heard about Bitcoin the last year, then he's been living under a rock, really. But a lot of people have some kind of concepts or preconceptions which we will address right now. So it is really hard to find proper, genuine information about cryptocurrencies. Everybody knows that Bitcoin is the dominant cryptocurrency and there are other cryptocurrencies. I will use these terms for this, in the scope of this presentation, I will use these terms synonymously for the sake of simplicity. Okay, so what are cryptocurrencies? If you ask an average guy what are cryptocurrencies, they will say that it is a kind of digital money or a payment system. Do you agree? That's the common perception of Bitcoins. I would like to dig a little bit deeper and analyze the core concept upon which the cryptocurrencies, this generation of cryptocurrencies is based. This is called the blockchain. So what is the blockchain? It is a decentralized public ledger. So each of the words has its sense. So imagine it as a peer-to-peer distributed database or log history of all the Bitcoin transactions that have ever happened. And it's completely open, everybody can check it. So, and there comes the next kind of perception. If you ask somebody what is Bitcoin about, they would say that, well, it is anonymous, so it is a very good tool to enable powering and financing, criminal activities. I would say they are a bit wrong because it's not really anonymous. It is true that you as a person can generate a new Bitcoin address and start using Bitcoin without having to go to central authorities with your photo ID. Yeah, that's really true. However, if you issue Bitcoin transactions, they make their way into the blockchain, which is public. They cannot be erased anymore, which means that if at a future point in time somebody is able to correlate your identity, link your identity to that Bitcoin address that you have used, then basically they will be able to see all the inbound and outbound transactions and discover your network with whom you are trading. So this is why let us call it pseudo-anonymity and not anonymity, because these are two different things. You can definitely take measures to increase your privacy, but nothing is free, it's not anonymous. I want to make a clear statement here. Another concept that I will only touch, I will not spend much time on this, is that the users of Bitcoin mistrust the authorities. They are some kind of anarchist. They don't trust their local authorities. Well, this comes from the concept of Bitcoin that is self-regulating, meaning that the rate at which new Bitcoins are released into the system, this cannot be controlled centrally. Everybody has heard about Fed, and everybody has heard about the different implications if a government can decide how much dollars or other currencies they print. There are some implications. I will not go into economics or politics simply because I don't have that background, okay? But what I know that for Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies, there is a mathematical function which controls the rate at which new Bitcoins are released into the circulation, and this cannot be altered by anybody, basically. Okay. In the morning, when I tested my presentation on this very beamer, this very projector, I found a very nasty surprise. My presentation was mostly in red and blue colors, which is kind of not optimal for this sort of... and also the screen resolution is a little bit low, therefore you might not be able to see the lines. Do you see the lines? Not really. Okay. So I have a choice. Either I do some kind of stand-up comedy type of things, or we simply skip the slides. So let me ask the question, is there anybody in the room who doesn't understand the basics of digital signatures and the basics of Bitcoin transactions? Please raise your hands if anybody doesn't have the fundamentals. Okay? Okay. So I will very, very briefly address it, because actually this slide, this diagram I have borrowed from the Bitcoin white paper. Anytime when I borrow content from other locations, I have the proper source included, which you cannot read because it's a very small print, but in the handouts, you will be able to download and read it and track it down yourself. So most of the presentation, I don't want to go really hardcore on the crypto stuff, but I give you the pointers, the hooks, where you can look up the details later. So this is, I believe, the first diagram in the first Bitcoin white paper. And this shares basically a concept how a Bitcoin transaction works. So Bitcoin transaction is a digitally signed transfer of ownership of Bitcoins from one party to another party. The idea is rather simple. A Bitcoin address is, I will make it really simple. Imagine a Bitcoin address as a hash of a public key. So if I want to transfer a few of my Bitcoins to somebody else, then the transaction will reference my inbound transaction where I receive these coins that I want to pass on to somebody else. It also contains, so it contains a pointer, or better said, a hash of the previous transaction pointing to the previous transaction. It contains the Bitcoin address of the recipient to whom I want to transfer the Bitcoins, and some other data which is not important right now. Then I sign it with my private key, meaning that whenever this is broadcasted to the network, everybody will be able to verify that it's a transaction that originates from me, and I send it to the recipient based on the Bitcoin address, which is the hash of the public key, and the recipient will be able, based on his private key, to pass it on to a yet third or another participant. This was very brief and a little bit sloppy, but I really want to don't waste a lot of time, don't burn a lot of time on this topic. So was this enough for a really quick start? Okay. Now I have told you that this is a decentralized network, meaning a peer-to-peer worldwide network. Transactions are great, and we have the digital signatures. Okay, that's all good. But the order in which the transactions arrive are a little bit critical, because for peer-to-peer networks, two events can happen at almost the same time, very close in time, different sides of the planets, and how they propagate through the peer-to-peer network, which one is assumed to be the first one or the second one, this is a little bit hard to predict, because any peer-to-peer distributed database is basically a multiplayer game, and the task is to meet a consensus on the content of the blockchain and the order of the actual transactions. Obviously, if I'm able to play with the ordering, then that might result into the so-called double spends, me being able to spend the same coins multiple times on two different sides of the verse. We had this issue with the credit cards as well, that if you go to two ATMs with a credit card and very, very close in time, you try to withdraw money, then you might be able to withdraw more than your actual balance. We had these attacks before. It's very similar to the peer-to-peer networks here in concept. So actually we have arrived to our next diagram, which is a little bit maybe more, visible. This is also borrowed from the Bitcoin white paper. You will be able to look it up in more detail. Sorry that it's not so visible under this resolution, but here the idea is to go into more details on the blockchain. We have covered the transactions so far, and the individual blocks are batching, grouping transactions, which get organized into the so-called blocks. And the miners, the Bitcoin miners, everybody has heard about Bitcoin miners. They are basically Bitcoin nodes spread across the globe, and they receive the incoming transactions. They batch these transactions into append it to a list, to put it the simple way, and they try to figure out a valid block header. If they are able to find a valid block header, then they put it on the top of the block, and they can broadcast their block to the Bitcoin network, and then they have solved their tasks. Let us go a little bit into more detail of that. The blockchain is basically, imagine it as a kind of linked list. The linking happens by including the hash of the previous block into the block header as a reference to the previous node. Okay. It also includes a hash of all the transactions. This is used with Merkle trees, trees of hashes, put it that way. And miners are basically iterating a random number and calculating the hash that way from this structure. And if that hash has a value below a given target, then this is meant to be a valid block, so they can broadcast it to the network. And why they do that, why they invest all the electricity into number crunching, is basically because the rule is that into each new block, the miner that has found the matching hash, that has proved that he has spent a lot of work on calculating the matching hash, he is authorized, he is entitled to put a new transaction granting him, at this point in time, 25 bitcoins. So there's the incentive on the miner side to participate in this game. The amount of the block reward, that's how they call it, this decreases. It is also a control mathematical function, so in early days, we need a high incentive to make it more popular, become more mainstream, and then it will decrease. So basically, as you can see, the blockchain is it's really the main ingredient of this topic, and it needs the active participation of miners, cryptography. And once we have a valid list of blocks, then we have a cryptographically enforced integrity and order of the transactions within the Bitcoin network. That basically prevents double spending, if I put it really the simple way. Now a simple question, what happens if two miners, one in Kuala Lumpur, the other in Budapest, finds a valid block within the same second or very close in time? Well, what will happen in this case? Both will broadcast it to the network. Okay. Eventually, this message will propagate to multiple peers, and the miners will start working on the two different branches of the blockchain. Then at a point in time, somebody will find a new block, either on this branch or the other branch, and append it to that branch. And the rule then is that all the miners will have to mine on the longest valid proof of work branch chain. In this case, the other branch which gets abandoned, all the transactions are invalidated, they become pending transactions again, so they are not lost, they are just delayed, waiting for a new miner to pick it up and include it into the block that will be appended to the longest chain. I'm just looking for some confirmations whether I'm being clear on that. Very good, thank you very much. So this was almost all the voodoo stuff. The next is really simple, the big picture, what I call the big picture of the Bitcoin ecosystem. So up to now, I have only covered the Bitcoin protocol and the basics of the Bitcoin network. However, we have to understand that Bitcoin is a part of, I mean, it is a virtual like reality which has some interaction, which is inside our reality, and it has some interactions and gateways. One of the interactions is with the mining. They eat up a lot of electricity, as you have heard. The other very important kind of interface is the exchanges where you put your own euros or forints and you buy bitcoins for that. Again, at the point that you get a transaction that crosses the boundary between the Bitcoin world and the real world, then you are not protected by cryptography anymore, obviously, because these rules only apply inside the Bitcoin world. Another example is if you want to buy something via Bitcoins and somebody is going to ship you a real product for your Bitcoins. Here again, what are the guarantees? You know, at the point the vendor decides to ship his goods, can a transaction be reversed? So it's really a different nature of the cryptocurrency ecosystem and of the real world. We will see it later in more details. And of course, last but not least, the end users storing their bitcoins in their wallets, they are also exposed. They have to take some security measures to, or at least understand the inherent risks. So we will address these points where there is interaction between the outside world and the ecosystem of cryptocurrencies. So first of all, the wallets. What you have to know, because it is based on digital signatures and elliptic curve based cryptography, it is very important to understand that you have to own your private keys, and you have to back up these private keys and never share it with anybody. This sounds like something very, very self-evident to you because you are technically educated and know the risk. However, there are a lot of users who simply don't pay enough attention. They want to get started really quickly, which means they go to an online website, like an online wallet. They register with their username, email, and password, define a password, and in fact, they never see their private key. So what happens if somebody hacks that online wallet provider? You never had the private key, my friend, right? It's bad luck. Even though they might have like two-factor authentication, Google Authenticator, whatever, but it's still an online account where you log in with your credentials and you never get hold of the private key. So any solution where you don't own the private key is at least a big red flag for me. To be fair, I have to tell that some of the online wallets have some solutions where the magic is done in JavaScript or browser extensions, but again, this feels a little bit sketchy to me. Then mobile wallets. Anybody a little bit familiar with mobile application know that there are basically two sorts of dominant mobile application. One is a native application, and the other is basically a web application running inside your mobile phone. Okay, this is the hybrid apps. Now my question is the following. Let's say that you have a properly written, developed with security in mind, a kind of mobile wallet solution. Would you deploy it to your Android phone? Do you consider it to be a platform secure enough for storing your funds, your pension, savings? Not really. However, if I want to buy a beer with bitcoins, then obviously I need to, take appropriate measures proportional to the value that I want to protect, right? So basically, if it's about a beer or a few euros, a mobile wallet is okay, but otherwise, not really. Okay, let's move on to desktop wallets. These are normal client applications running on what kind of operating system? Yes. So I would definitely be very careful about, this is not about vendors or anything, but you need a hardened proper operating system. There are hardware wallets as well. We will cover them a little bit more detail. And there is another idea called brain wallet, which means that you have to memorize something, and you don't need to store your private key. If you drink a lot, it might not be the perfect solution. And one more implication, if you want to make use of your coins, then you need to import your private key into a software at a point in time in the future. So it's not like a permanent solution, okay? Okay. One more thing. There is the idea of watching-only wallet, which means that take a wallet that has the private key removed from it. It enables you to check your funds, check your balance, check your incoming transactions, and validate your incoming transactions. Why? You only need your public key in order to validate those transactions, and you're not able to send any transaction. This is called a watching-only wallet, and it's only one logical next step. We can split the work of issuing a transaction the way like you have an internet-connected wallet on a less secure platform. You create the raw transaction, you take it, you move to an offline, absolutely hyper-secure computer. There you sign the transaction with your private key. This super secure computer has never even touched the internet, right? So it's absolutely secure. And then you bring back the signed transaction. This is called offline transaction signing, and the concept is cold storage. Cold storage stands for Bitcoin stored offline in a very secure location, okay? Hardware wallets operate in a similar manner. You can connect them to your computer, and the private key never leaves that small gadget. Actually, that's the core idea. Okay, privacy issues. As I have said before, if you're starting to use your Bitcoin address, and somebody is able to associate that with your identity, then your privacy gets hurt a little bit. One thing to counterfeit that is the application of change addresses. This means if I have 5 accounts and I want to transfer, if I have 5 Bitcoins, stored on one of my addresses and I want to transfer you 2 Bitcoins, then what I do is I create a transaction that takes all my 5 Bitcoins, but splits it, sending you the 2 Bitcoins and transferring the remaining 3 Bitcoins, the change, to a newly generated virgin address that has never been used, that is not known to whom it belongs, but it belongs to me. So basically, it allows you to use one address exactly twice when you receive funds and when you make the first outbound transaction, because all the change, all the remaining is straight, right away transferred to an alternative, to a second address. Then the question arises, okay, but come on, after each transaction, I need to back up my wallet again, right? Because a new private key has been generated on that. Or okay, you can pre-generate like 100, but still you can shoot yourself into the toes with that concept. And here enter what is called a hierarchical deterministic wallet. Here we have a massive master key, put it that way, and from this master key, a series of Bitcoin addresses or Bitcoin private key, public keys can be derived in a deterministic way. If you only know a couple of these addresses, then you cannot predict the next one because you need the master key for that. Is this concept a little bit, it's clear? Yes. So here the core concept is that you need to memorize something else, and you don't need to be worried about the infinite, possibly infinite amount of Bitcoin addresses that you have to back up. Okay, so what do we have to back up? Once again, it's basically a client-specific data file, or dumping your private key into the raw format, or memorizing this kind of master key with the hierarchical deterministic wallets. Of course, you can use Tor to increase your privacy as well, and these 3 aspects together, these are for pretty good privacy, reflecting on your note before. Let us a little bit discuss about the resource consumptions of the different wallet types. I was talking about Bitcoin miners, which need to operate a full functionality Bitcoin node, storing the whole blockchain and being able to receive transactions and publish, broadcast new blocks. The full blockchain is currently about 20 gigabytes and is growing and growing and growing. Traditional or the third generation clients were almost like the full Bitcoin nodes, but running in client mode, meaning that they still needed to store the whole, the total blockchain from the 0 Genesis block until now, and this is growing. Obviously, you cannot do that on a mobile phone, can you? Obviously not. Then there are some inventions. If you think about, okay, now I would like to reference the diagram that was not really visible, but if you think about this diagram, then in order to validate a given transaction, whether it has really happened, what you need is to be sure that the block headers are valid, to download the block headers, not the blocks itself. And what you need is the Merkle branch, the path from your transaction to the root of the Merkle tree, and you need to validate that one, right? It's basically not validating the whole block, but it's only downloading the block headers and validating your specific transactions. This would allow you to work with 25 megabytes instead of 20 gigabytes, and this is called the light client. One aspect here that should be considered is to which servers you turn for querying the Merkle branches. Does it become centralized, or does it still maintain the peer-to-peer properties? This depends on the implementation. You will have to check it. I'm just sharing the concept, but you will have to open the door and walk in by investigating. This concept is clear to everyone, I guess. Very good. Okay. Anybody has heard about Mongox? Yeah. Good. So now I will very briefly discuss exchanges, the good and the bad sides of exchanges, and what you should be aware of. Exchanges are basically services that allow you to trade between cryptocurrencies and fiat money. Essentially, it needs to enable high-frequency trading like Forex and this type of stuff. This results into off-chain transactions. You know that a block is found on average every 10 minutes. You cannot do high-frequency trading currently on the blockchain because you would have to wait like 10 minutes for that, at least 10 minutes, right? So what these guys at the exchanges have been implementing is off-chain transactions, which means they are moving the value outside of the blockchain. This means that an exchange has the blockchain addresses and blockchains in that, but they maintain a separate database for their users, keeping track of their account balances. This allows them to gain speed because they don't have to wait for blocks to be found or confirmations. It comes with privacy and anonymity implications because you don't really have you don't really know what's going on in their database and what kind of information they are tracking or not. They can get rid of transaction fees associated with Bitcoin transactions because they're doing that inside their own database. Okay, there is some scalability improvements as well. Because of the speed and because of the many small transactions, they will not bump into any kind of block size limit or any kind of technical limit within the Bitcoin protocol, which could be addressed in a future version of or after an improvement. But hey, wait a bit. If they are transacting within their own database, where is my digital security? Where is my crypto stuff? I like Bitcoin because it guarantees me, by the ways of mathematics cryptography, that my Bitcoins are really mine. When can I say that these coins are mine? Only when they are stored on an address where the private key is only known by me. Okay, so as long as they are stored at the exchange, they are not really mine. Everybody understands the core difference between the two that I'm saying. So don't make the mistake of confusing a trading account with your saving accounts because it does not work that way. If you want to engage into high-frequency trading, you have to take the risk. But for me, I will occasionally buy some Bitcoins, then immediately move them to my private stash, okay, to keep it safe. Okay, these are the good and bad sides. Of course, you can. It's needless to say, you need to use a strong password, second authentication factor, certificate pinning, and all the things that common sense allows, but still keep in mind, as you don't have the private key for your account at the exchange, those coins are not yours until you send it to yourself, to your private address. Now, this was the good and bad sides. Let's face the ugly. I don't want to speculate. So this is imaginary, obviously. This hasn't ever happened. You are not looking for these droids. And I will discuss fraud. Fraud is an intentional, malicious action of trying to fool somebody. Here I have a more fancy definition borrowed from some of the online dictionaries, the free dictionary. We all know that financial institutions are forced to apply some kind of regulatory, some kind of measures in order to be compliant with local regulations. That means that they need to be audited from time to time. They cannot publish fake information, and we are used to that. A trading platform really looks like the normal stock exchange from the outside, but it doesn't have to obey such compliance requirements, okay? At least in 2030, it was not really clear from the legal aspect whether they have to apply some kind of measures or what compliance level they need to enforce, okay? So just for the fun of it, let's imagine what happens if a big trading platform artificially modifies the volumes and the price graphs, the statistics. Will it fool the users to take actions that they wouldn't have taken otherwise? Yes. Can it have drastic impacts? Yes, it can. Okay. I'm just making this up, really. I'm not the guilty one. So think about what would happen if the sum of your internal balances stored in the internal database grows a little bit bigger than the assets, than the number of bitcoins the exchange actually owns. They are like selling more than they actually have. Will you be able to spot it? No. Only the last guy who wants to withdraw his money, he will be the unlucky one, right? Why? All the others get their money, that there are missing like 2,000 coins. Bad luck. The last one eats it all. Is it clear how this can hurt back? So basically, cryptography does not help you to ensure that you are only able to sell as many bitcoins as you actually have, because it's kept in an internal database most of the times. So why are third-party audits good? Therefore, what are inventory reviews performed by independent third parties? This type of reviews which review your assets, review your inventory and your methods of trading, and these are not hard guarantees, but at least some kind of intention. Okay. So again, take ownership of your coins. Do not get goxed. Goxed is a very fancy new word that just arises when the amount gox went down. And keep in mind again, at the exchanges, your contract is not enforced by technology, not enforced by cryptography. Okay. Mining, very, very briefly. We have already covered some aspects of it. So basically, it's about batching transactions into block, which enforces the integrity and the order of the transactions. It's about proof of work, mining, calculating some hashes. Here I have included, the color coding is not visible from far away, I would guess, but here the idea is that you include the hash of the previous block, you include a hash of your transactions, okay, the Merkle root, you include some kind of approximate timestamp, the network representation of the network difficulty, and the nonce which you iterate until you find a proper matching hash which is below of the target, where the value is below of the target. Okay, as more transactions are coming in, the Merkle root changes, timestamp changes. These two change slowly, and nonce changes really, really quickly. This is all about mining. And from time to time, every 2016 blocks, the difficulty is adjusted, which means that the target and the bits are also changed, like every 2 weeks on average. Difficulty is used, so basically the Bitcoin system recalibrates itself whenever the hash rate grows. It recalibrates itself the way that on average every 10 minutes one new block will be found. Let's move on to mining. Basically you have the choice to do solo mining, running your own infrastructure for that. It's really like gambling because your mining capacity is very, very tiny, so whether you find a block or not is pure luck. It's like playing the lottery. There is network latency, initial setup, maintenance, whatever. Or you can join a pool. Everybody, somebody else, the operators take care of that, but what are the guarantees that they can give you? You get a steady income, the variance is lower, however, there might be some issues. I need to speed up a little bit. Here I would basically cover how mining pools are attacked. Well, all the same variation of denial of service attacks targeting either the core mining infrastructure or the user statistics, because if the user statistics page goes down, then people will, the user perception is that mining is not operational, and they will jump to a different pool. This is equivalent to denial of service, basically. They can use different traditional injection network-related attacks, or these are young guys trying to solve problems with NoSQL databases which have no ASIC properties, meaning that it's not really transactional, so you can do a lot of nasty things based on the improper choice of architectural or conceptual design patterns in this area. There has been a lot of insider jobs in big data centers. As the value of Bitcoin rises, obviously more people get interested into performing insider jobs. There's one very interesting thing that I would like to shortly mention, is basically a block withholding attack, which means that it seems like a legitimate miner, but whenever it performs the jobs, it is able to detect which is the winning share, the part of the small job that is the block solution, and it decides not to send it back to the pool, but try to work further. This way it will seem like the hash rate of the pool is high, but the success rate of finding blocks is really low. This is known since 2011, but it was recently also seen on one of the larger pools. Okay, how miners can harm the ecosystem. Basically, pending rewards which are stored at the miner, similarly like with ink changes, they are not yours. This is one thing that you should memorize. The transparency of reward calculation is lacking, okay? So you cannot really follow up how your mining hardware performs and whether you are really getting the rewards that you should, because you are not able to follow up. There's also one very, very interesting topic that we will not be able to cover in depth, is the double spending attack mediated by a miner, which means that if you have control over a large rate of the network hash rate, the network capacity of Bitcoin, then you are able to do double spending more reliably, not because Bitcoin is bad as such, but because the interfaces between the Bitcoin and the real world have to agree that after a given number of confirmations or a given number of time, they consider a block to be valid. And if a longer blockchain has been mined in the meantime but hidden, and then it gets broadcasted to the network, then this longer chain will become the reality. All the transactions in the other chain get abandoned, they get undone, right? But maybe you have spent the same coins in the other chain. This is not a problem with Bitcoin itself. This is a problem with payment service providers and at which point in time they choose to take a transaction as granted, as valid. Okay, one another thing is miners can misuse your computational power, because most of the times you don't really have visibility on what your miner is working on, so they can attack altcoins, or they can perform attacks using your capacity without you being aware of that, which is kind of nasty a little bit. Okay, and now let me jump to a case study. Unfortunately, I was taking more time than I wanted, but it is what it is. So I was doing some kind of analysis on a pool driven by Slush. This guy is a great innovator in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So he was the inventor of, he implemented the first mining pool in 2010. Then 1 year later, he implemented a protocol and also a lightweight client which does the simplified payment. So it basically doesn't need to download the blockchain. It was a big innovation. Then 1 year later, the Stratum protocol was extended, and this became the de facto mining protocol for very low latency and being much more scalable. Then the year before, 2013, he and some other colleagues, he has implemented the first hardware wallet for secure storage and transaction signing. So he's really a nice guy, completely open, calm. He's not really like many others on the Bitcoin forums. I have analyzed his pool, which is not to mean that he did anything fraudulent. He didn't. It was just the fact that I have observed some things which I couldn't explain to myself. based on the published reward calculation. And instead of trolling on the forums, I decided to roll my sleeves up and do the job. So basically, the published reward calculation is a kind of exponential score-based algorithm. This is to protect against pool hoppers. I did not go into details about pool hopping. You have either heard about that or not. You can look at that later. Sorry, we will not have time. We can cover this afterwards offline. So here is the published reward calculation. And I observe sometimes that there is an extremely high variance, or my achieved scores get like almost zero down to a very small number, decreased by orders of magnitude, which I didn't understand why. And I have also seen that after a block was successfully mined and my results, my reward was published, then it was like zeroed out and changed to another number, which was like spooky for me. I didn't understand, so that's why I wanted to take to process an analysis for that. So basically, I decided to go with a passive analysis. Did not artificially adjust anything. I was just measuring, looking at the statistics. I was exploring what JSON API is available. I was assessing what kind of caching, what kind of data granularity I can get, timestamp precision, because obviously if your statistics are cached for like 5 minutes, then it's very hard to work with that. I have made some assumptions and started collecting data based on simple cron and some shell scripts, processing in parallel. At the time I had some kind of initial data set, I already started processing it, like simulation, filtering, and all the stuff was done in Python, and a pinch of R, which is a very useful language for statistical data processing, and visualization was done in GNU-plot. So the first finding that I have seen is the retroactive adjustment of the actual scores. We had a kind of DDoS, and I believe that some of the data was lost about who has mined, when the shares were submitted. So I took the statistics before and after the reset, and you can see that the total score after the reset is equivalent to the number of shares submitted, which means that obviously no exponential scoring was applied, but one share equals one score, so it's a straight proportional system was applied because some of the timing data has been lost during the DDoS. At least that's my conclusion. That must have been, it looks like that has happened. So I have sent some emails to the pool operator. He was pretty open about that. We've discussed that this was probably the most fair things that he could do after this attack has happened, and after the data he has lost, there was no way back, right? So this was the most fair approach that he could take. I agree with that, there's no problem, and right now I can explain to myself why this happens, so I can sleep better. Okay, so here are some details about some further investigation. I'm really sorry, I'm running out of time, so I need to shortcut it. I lost my data because of my own stupidity. I did need to collect statistics twice. Lessons learned. Then the other thing, I have my data sets cross-checked with a person named Organov-Korti. He goes by that screen name in bitcointalk.org. And he's really involved in statistics. We were able to find some kind of linear approximation for these resets, but all these numbers, let me use the technology. So all these numbers, they look a little bit ugly, and I thought that there must be something simpler than that. It's the concept of Occam's razor, that whenever we find a simpler solution, it's more valuable, so I was searching for a simpler one. And basically, here is the data visualization, which you will be able to see much better in the once you download the PDF version. So here we have seen some kind of line fitting probability, but here we have seen a lot of things that was not on this line, and this is really a significant part of that. So it's not a measurement error in any way. After some kind of tweaking, here you see a kind of two exponential functions, and based on the colors which you are either able or not able to see, here you can see that basically a parameter which we did not consider before. The system time plays a big role in how these numbers are adjusted. So I was assuming that it depends on the round duration or something relative to that block, and the system time is something global, and I really have assumed that this doesn't play a big role, but in fact it plays. This is yet another something that you cannot see properly, so I will just skip it. So basically the results are that we have been able to find the rescale function that is applied. This was not documented at all, and actually the rescale happens at the leap of each hour based on system time, and the function is like that, which means that if I need to take my mining equipment offline for a 5 minutes maintenance, guess what is better? Doing it 8 o'clock 55, between 8 o'clock 55 and 8 o'clock 59, or doing it somewhere else? Well, you definitely can play with the timing in order to minimize the impacts of your downtime according to your score. Can it be used for strategic mining to gain a lot of extra bonus? Well, I leave it as a homework to the guys who are interested in that. I only consider a kind of minimizing the impact of planned maintenance windows for now. These are the findings. This is so simple that it seems plausible that it's actually the formula that we have found. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank the guy running the pool and for all his innovation, and also thank Organ of Corti for motivating me and during this analysis, and for cross-checking the final results. And I don't know if we have any time for questions. If not, then I encourage everybody to catch up with me in the speaker's corner in the leisure room. And thank you very much for your attention.